bankruptcy was something I never thought was going to happen. I think that was back in like 2015, 2016, somewhere around there. But I never thought that was going to happen. And I never thought, a lot of it was from the wedding because they just put it all on credit cards. And so it was just, and then the doctor bills from like, endoscopies and just like girls seemed like they were sick like every month. It seemed like some type of ear infection, which to figure out was just like, put the tubes in their ears and stuff. There was like different operations here, a couple overnight stays in the hospital for breathing and stuff like that. So it was just, it all mounted up. I mean, I never thought it was that far gone, but
Was any of that from Shannon's neck surgery, or are those bills pretty well paid up?
Well, I think the bankruptcy never touched the medical part of it because you have to be like specify the medical part of it, medical bankruptcy, and then there's like regular bankruptcy.
Oh,
I don't think bankruptcy ever touches like student loans or medical stuff. You have to like be specific with that.
Okay.
But I think it just took away like a lot of the furniture that we had bought, and then a couple other things inside the house. To kind of alleviate a lot of the. It took. We had to make the house payment up by phone every month, and I had to listen to the bankruptcy spiel like every time, and it's just like I didn't know how long it was going to take. But apparently it was. Once you're in bankruptcy, it's pretty much you never get out of it.
Yeah.
It seemed it felt like.
Weren't you guys behind on your mortgage? Even when I talked to you?
Earlier in I think December 2017, and then January, February, March 2018. That's when we took the 401k out, the loan out to pay for that.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. As you probably figured, this episode will be dealing with the idea that Chris Watts is very intelligent through the narrative, I guess, of the finances. So we've already gone through a little clip from the second confession recorded in February 2018 at Dodge Correctional, where you can sort of hear Watts talking about the financial situation. You can sort of hear he's not very sure of himself, and you can also hear that the agents are not very convinced by what he's saying, and they've sort of got to pepper him with sort of details to get him kind of on track with what he's saying. You even have the detective sort of asking him, was neck surgery a factor, and this and that and the next thing. Essentially, just through this this particular narrative dealing with the finances, we want to test this whole notion that Chris Watts had an IQ of 140, that he's almost a genius. Now, I've heard people saying that, he was a bit like Sheldon Cooper in Big Bang Theory. He's a really intelligent guy, but then he's like got these sort of funny flaws, like he's socially awkward. And well, if you're going to make that argument, you've got to make the argument that he was a really intelligent guy. So in other words, whatever his social issues and whatever his emotional limits or whatever call it, where is the intelligence? Like where are you sort of seeing the genius sort of actually illustrated? So if you go back to the Sheldon's analogy, you can easily say, well, you look at his peer-reviewed reports, you look at what he knows about a lot of things. You look at how eloquent he is, even if he's rude or socially maladjusted. You look at his vocabulary, and you look at his general knowledge, and you look at his application with algorithms, and you look at the people that he associates with, and you look at the people he reads and the people he respects and the people he models himself on, and so on and so on. But you quickly get an idea whether he's is intelligent or not on any subject, right? And so that whole argument that Chris Watts is very dumb, but that doesn't mean he's not a genius, doesn't quite work. I mean, you've got to find the area where he's supposedly very smart. I'm not saying he's dumb in every area. I'm just saying the idea that he's a genius in any area is disputable. That's all. In other narratives who have dealt with this, I have spoken about his aptitude and his backstory, with NASCAR and what his high school teacher said. So I have dealt with that. I'm not going to deal with that aspect here. That is an aspect that should be looked at. What we are going to look at here is, as I say, the notion of Chris Watts's IQ through the narrative of the finances. And we kind of get the idea that Watts is like a numbers guy, or that he has a good memory, or that he maybe has attention to detail or something like that, or even just that he's a crafty guy. But when we look at it through the finances, it doesn't look good, put it that way. Now, according to Chris Watts, according to him, he's a genius. During the second confession, when asked how he was doing mentally, his IQ came up 135 or 140. Well, which is it? Can one be specific about which number we're talking about here? I know my IQ, and according to the graph, it's higher than way more than 80% of the people out there. I know my IQ to the exact number, and most people do as well. I think most people who do know their IQs know the exact number. You're not gonna be like between that and that. You're gonna know the number. So already it seems a bit odd that Watts is like it's 135 or 140 kind of thing. In any event, if Watts is to be believed, and just those words ought to give us pause, then he's in the elite 2.1% of the human race, which means he's an incredibly smart guy. Really? Is he? In the Silver Fox series, I deal with this aspect in more detail. We must be careful treating official reports or rumors of official reports as gospel. For example, we don't know if the autopsy reports as we know them are complete or not. But one thing is clear, not a single image from the autopsy has been made available. And I think that sets this case apart from virtually all other high-profile cases. From John Benet Ramsey to Scott Peterson, from O.J. Simpson to the West Memphis Three, from Amanda Knox to Casey Anthony, the media have always been able to get hold of post-mortem images and material. Not this time. There are literally no images of any of the victims in this case. And that's, in terms of a very high-profile case, it is unusual. One might argue that the reason for it is because it never went to court, but even so, it's clear that that Weld County put the autopsy report kind of under lock and key. The irony with the Watts case is that most people seem to think he's not only stupider than he really is, especially with regard to the execution of this crime, but a substantial number think he's smarter than he really is as well. On the blog post, I've provided a couple of links that debunk some of these notions and that explore them and expand on them in more detail. So you're welcome to go to the Crime Rocket blog post dealing with this particular episode. And there's some interesting content. One of them dealing with Chris Watts is the dumbest criminal ever. More proof that Chris Watts was a lovesick fool, and that has to do with him apparently texting Kissinger while he was sort of standing beside the television in just Nastitch's home. So, you can imagine if he's a just a reasonably clever guy, in the middle of being questioned by the police and other people, he's sort of sending silly-ish text. And I do think, a way to test the intelligence of any person, including you and me, is just look at someone's phone. Look at what they are talking about with their friends on their phone on a daily basis. What is the content of those conversations? That's going to give you a very clear indication of the sort of type of person you're dealing with, not just their intelligence, but just their sort of aptitude, their discipline, their reasoning skills and whatnot. Another blog post you could go and look at is, would you have done better at murder than Chris Watts did? And I think that's quite an important question because it basically gets practical with this notion where people say how not very intelligent the execution of the crime was, right? Another one is Chris Watts' family homicides were far from a perfect murder, and then it provides a interesting analysis on what a perfectly executed murder would look like or should look like, and how difficult that is to actually achieve. Another post you can go into is, why did a very bad liar think he was a good one? Chris Watts and the Dunning-Kruger effect. So that's also a really interesting exploration on the psychology, is and I think this is true of quite a few people, is why do they think they are good liars? Irrespective of what we think about them, where did they get the idea that they were good at lying, right? In the animal kingdom, a silver fox is a pretty clever, pretty crafty creature. In human terms, a silver fox may be good looking, smart, or both. But I'm not going to deal with that sort of detail or analysis here. I'll deal with that in the books, but except to break down, as I say, one particular area, the finances. That's sort of what you want to focus on here. One can spend quite a lot of time, one can write a chapter, even a couple of chapters, on what is intelligence, but going into other aspects. His emotional intelligence is a whole story on its own. His criminal intelligence is a whole story on its own. His ability to conduct an affair, his intelligence on that, and so on and so on. And when you look at all those individually, you get a clearer idea of his intelligence overall. And I don't think it's as simple as saying that he's dumb or smart. He's not dumb, but I don't think he's particularly smart either. He falls somewhere in the average area. But let's acknowledge the fact that he's a dude named Rain Man by his co-workers. So that nickname he didn't get for nothing, right? It's definitely not a nickname that is not acknowledging some aspect of his mental and cognitive ability. So, literally his nickname at work is pointing to the fact that something unusual is going on there, right? Watts' memory is supposed to be pretty sharp, right? So, according to this nickname, we are inclined to sort of be led by the hand that shouldn't this indicate that he's at least got a sharp memory, right? If you take the Rain Man moniker and you sort of link it to the movie, it's about a guy who's not very socially adjusted, and in a weird way sort of mentally handicapped, while at the same time he's got this almost genius ability to remember things, in the famous movie called Rain Man. So Watts is being associated with that, a sort of somewhat weird guy quiet guy, but also a guy with an incredible memory. Um, that's one thing, but the other aspect of it is what's his memory like in other areas, right? So let's first just deal a little bit with the whole Rain Man concept. We get that on page 582 of the discovery documents, where, and again, this is Watts talking about himself, but in terms of what other people are saying about him, that, and I quote, some people at work call him Rain Man because if he goes to an oil site once, he will remember it, end quote. So that's what he says about himself and what he's saying about what others think of him and how they know him and what they call him. If we take that and we look at some aspects in the discovery, the body cam footage, questions he's asked, there are some sort of symptoms that Watts is quite numerate. His memory when it comes to numbers is pretty acute. Someone left a comment on the Crime Rocket blog just saying that they noticed that when Watts was asked, what time did Shanann come in, he gave an exact number, 01:48, right? When during the first confession, when Agent Coder asked him for the login details of various devices, from phones to the laptop to the security system, I think even to the modem, Watts was able to give the details from memory, and in a lot of cases the PIN code or the passcode were numbers, and Watts knew them all, and the numbers weren't always the same. I think in some cases they were the same, but that did seem to show some better than average memory. So I don't know how many people know their passwords for certain devices, if they're numbers, off by heart, including those of spouses, but whether that's average or not, it certainly isn't below average. The fact that he could remember these details for various devices isn't poor, put it that way. I wouldn't say it's genius either, but it's certainly not a case that he couldn't remember them. So that's one thing. So we're talking about number memory there, but then what about things like Shanann's username? He didn't know that. One can say, either he did know and he forgot, or he never knew. And maybe there's an explanation for why he never knew that, but it does seem a bit odd. It does seem not particularly smart that he doesn't even have access to his own finances. He doesn't have access to the family finances. Just think about that in a global sense. You've been bankrupt. It's a serious situation to be in, and yet you're in the dark about it. Apparently, you don't know what your wife's doing, and you don't have that information. Look, it's another argument to make that he did know and he's lying. I'm just saying, if he didn't know, that's not showing him to be particularly smart. Him claiming that he didn't know is also in a way an admission that he wasn't that smart, and I think that's where one must start to bear in mind that aspect. We also know that Watts didn't know or couldn't guess the password for Shanann's phone when he was put on the spot. So again, there one has the idea that he did know her password at one point, but then he didn't. And again, we don't know for sure that he didn't. That could also be a lie, but he has an admission again that he didn't know that, right? So one can hold them against each other and say, well, surely if he has this excellent memory, he should have known, and maybe he's just lying about it. But if we take other things like the fact that he forgot the fitted sheet at the gravesite, that's not the sign of a guy with an incredible memory. Again, you can say he didn't forget it. Maybe he ran out of time or something. Well, it's something careless that he did, and it's not the sign of genius, right? Can we agree on that? He also seemed to have no idea how the family finances got so out of whack. When you listen to the interview, he doesn't seem to know how it happened, even though it was happening over a period of years, and even though you had sort of the first warning of the bankruptcy. And so when you listen to the clip from Dodge Correctional, the incredible thing is the moment they started falling behind in their mortgage payments was December 2017. And this is the very same moment Shanann quit her job, officially at least, to stay home and sell Thrive full time. And that's the real benefit we have from having time-stamped Facebook posts. You can literally see exactly when Shanann sort of officially announced that she's quitting her work. And we know it was the day after Christmas in 2017, December 26, 2017. And when we take that decision and the timing of it, it's literally Shanann quitting her job right when their mortgage payments were falling behind. And so the question is, did that decision turn their finances around? So in other words, Shanann quitting her job, did her decision to do that, did that help? Did that decision work? Did Watts know whether it worked or not? Did Shanann think it was working? Was it working? Bear in mind, after falling pregnant in late April, early May, Shanann then went to North Carolina for 6 weeks, ostensibly on a work trip. During this period, her live videos, part of the bread and butter of Thrivers, who are conducting their business on social media, declined to virtually zero. So, on one of the original episodes on HLN, they covered the number of Facebook videos that Shanann uploaded, and she was always very busy in the social media sense. She was on Instagram, she was on Twitter, she was on Facebook, and it wasn't just Facebook videos, it was lots and lots of selfies, lots of promos, lots of interaction, especially on Facebook. And then you see the statistics going from February, this is February 2018, so this is about 2 months into Shanann being completely, working full-time as a Thriver. She's got 21 videos, and then in March down to 6, and then April up to 18, May 18, June 14, July 5, and then August 0. Remember, Shanann died, she lost her life sort of midway through the month of August, around about not around about August 13, so pretty much halfway through the month. So one would expect, shouldn't there be around about half the number of videos of the previous month? But they're not. There's not even 1 or 2 or 3, there's none. And so that also tells you something about something unusual was going on in August. Not only her health was impacted, not only the stress and arguing with her husband in North Carolina, but also possibly she was having maybe a crisis of confidence with Thrive. And we know that she wasn't sure whether she should go to Arizona, but in the end she did go. So it does also show that as late as the last weekend she was alive in August, Shanann was still, she still did believe that Thrive was going to save them, it was going to save their finances. The question is really whether Watts believed that. That's really a really interesting question. We seem to get the idea from him that he did. We know in the discussion he gives to the agents in Dodge Correctional that, you know, Shanann's car was being paid off. Again, it's not clear whether he wasn't aware of how it was working or what, but you know, he seemed to be kind of an adherent of Thrive as well, and he seemed to be kind of a believer that it was working as well. The crucial words here are "seem to be." We don't know, even if he said that, we don't know if he really was, but let's put it this way: if Watts did truly believe that Thrive was working in terms of bringing in an income and that it was good for their finances, well, then I personally don't think he was even of average intelligence. I just don't. It's just my personal opinion that I don't think if he thought that that was going to improve the situation, I don't think that was very smart from his side. And overall, I don't think the whole MLM venture is smart. I don't think it's a smart way of making money, and I don't think in general the smartest people sort of get involved in it. It seems to prey on the people who are struggling and who can't hold down jobs and who are sort of looking for an excuse not to work, right? That's just my opinion. I know there are millions of people who are sort of working on MLMs full time, and they are a massive population. So I don't really want to argue with them. I'm just wanting to make the case that the fact is that Watts' family finances were in trouble, and then the question is, was the MLM thing a good idea? Was it a good idea to quit your job? And was it a good idea to, you know, for these videos to be decreasing? You know, it went from 21 in February to 0 in August. It went from 18 in April and May to just 5 in July. So, you know, the other aspect is, you know, was she able to sustain the output that she thought that she needed, you know? So another aspect that you can hear in the clip that I provided, which is from Dodge Correctional, you can hear Watts saying he's not sure if the bankruptcy was in 2015 or 2016. Let me help you. The couple filed for bankruptcy protection in July 2015 for the record. And for the record, it appears the Ruseks also filed in May of the same year for Chapter 7 continuances, right? And I provided a screen grab for you to just have a look at that. This is an aspect that I don't think the Ruseks have been completely open or transparent about. Is, you know, even when you hear about them moving to Shanann and them, or even when you hear Watts talking about it, the reason is they wanted to be closer to the children. That's the reason he gives. You know, when you have a big house and you've got an expensive car and you've got all of these expensive things in your home and clothing and whatnot, then it's all about the appearance that things are going really, really well. And so to say that you struggling financially is the opposite. It's admitting that things are going really, really badly. And so you would expect Watts not to be honest about the finances, because that's what he'd been doing for years to try to hide. Not only him, his wife as well. So he was married to his wife, and together they were sort of hiding the fact that they were struggling. And that alone could have, and one could argue should have been, reason for him to want to get divorced. Now, we can't live like this. It's not sustainable. And Watts knew it wasn't sustainable. So what were they doing? Why keep it up for as long as they were? According to Watts, their financial problems started after their wedding. And simply by putting all their expenses on credit cards, in terms of the wedding. And I don't think this changed since then. Whenever they had an expense onto the credit card, when that credit card is maxed, go to the next one. If this is true, then the couple's finances were messed up from the beginning, and it only got worse. That doesn't say much for his ability to run the numbers if they were wrecked from start to finish, does it? And this might also account for the incredibly daft decision from both him and her to have a third child, given the crisis state of their finances. I mean, this aspect alone seems to show the extent to which he was delusional. Delusional about money, delusional about love, delusional about life and death. And what about the 3 confessions? All contradictory in some way, all implausible in some way, and all reinforcing the notion of Watts as a dunce in some way. In the first, he forgets to perform CPR on his kids. Even just in the ruse of lying about what happened. When the agent asked him, well, Shanann's just killed his children. In fact, he kind of interrupts Shanann in this spiel. Obviously, it's not true, but in this spiel, he's talking about, he sort of interrupts Shanann while she's strangling Cece. And then he sort of asked, well, did you try and perform CPR on her? And he says no. Well, he's lied about so many things. Why not just lie about that? Why not just lie and say, well, yes, I tried to save her life. And the fact that he doesn't proves to the agents that this guy is definitely lying, and not only lying, he's a bad liar, right? You must bear in mind in the spiel as well, he's basically saying Shanann's just strangled Cece, but then she's also immediately turned blue. You don't immediately turn blue when you've been strangled. It takes, in fact, it's the opposite. Your face will flush up with blood as you strain to breathe, right? You'll be almost purple and really, really a lot of blood in your face as you exert yourself to try to fight for your life. So that whole thing of becoming pale and appearing blue will take quite a few minutes after death. Not like the moment that you take your hands off someone after strangling them, they will have turned blue. So this was just a absolutely ridiculous version from Watts, and the investigators could see it from a mile away. In the second confession, he doesn't know why he's taking his kids to the well site, and then he murders them seemingly at random after he just snapped, in inverted commas, with Shanann. He repeatedly said during that second confession that he didn't know what he was thinking. So yeah, you have him kind of accounting for himself, saying he had no idea what he was thinking. He was out of his mind. He was acting like a robot, not a particularly well-programmed robot either. And so in that confession, he's undermining his own mental ability, I guess. Even the first confession is about a crime of passion. It's where his emotions overcome him. In other words, he wasn't thinking when he did that either. So that the first and the second confessions are all about the inability to reason or process information or have any cognitive ability, and that's why the crimes happened. And then in the third confession, he bungles the murders of his children while his wife is sleeping in the house. So in all three of these confessions, he's kind of almost pointing the finger to his own stupidity. When Shanann accused him of having an affair, Watts slyly told her, "You know that would never happen, like you know the kind of guy I am." And in conclusion, I think this statement speaks volumes not only of his intelligence, but of how he believes he's able to manipulate people. And I think there is some intelligence there in his ability to deceive people. So that wraps up this episode. I'm going to play a few more clips just to reinforce what I've been saying here. If you're finding these videos insightful, please subscribe. Please share across your social networks. Please like and leave a comment. A lot of these conversations are as deep and as analytical as they may seem to be. They're actually just a very shallow, sort of superficial gloss through of the details. Again, when you reduce it to a narrative, when you write it down, when you transcribe, when you locate the information in the discovery and you cross-reference it, when you cross-reference all three versions, the first, second, and third confessions, when you decide what is true in the first confession, what is true in the second, what is true in the third, and you cross-reference that. When you decide what is not true in the first, second, and third in isolation, you cross-reference those. And also then when you apply the intertextuality of this case to other similar true crime scenarios, such as Scott Peterson, such as Casey Anthony, such as even the John Benet Ramsey case, and so on, then you get a much, much deeper and more congruent analysis. And that's important. It's important to go through all of this information in an encyclopedic manner and then distill it down to a cogent narrative that kind of makes sense. And what is missing from a lot of the commentary you see on YouTube is no one's really done that. People sort of jump from one confession to the next and they say, well, that's not true and I don't agree with that, but they don't sort of bring it all together and tie it all together, and they don't sort of come up with their own if Watts is lying, if that's not true, then what is true? If that's not the case and I don't believe that, then what is believable, right? And I do believe I'm the only person who's independently done that, and I don't believe going to Watts and talking to him just like the agents did, just like the detective did. I don't believe that's how you're going to get the right version. Really, people seem to think you're going to get the truth out of Watts when he's been lying all along. It's just crazy. It's crazy thinking. How you're going to get to the truth is by studying all the information and then putting together something that is forensically true. In other words, you look at the absolutely verifiable data in the discovery and in the phone data review and the actual evidence and the actual timelines and the last time people were seen and that sort of thing. And then this takes a kind of an aptitude for true crime, where you look at the statements of all the witnesses, from the friends to the co-workers and so on, and then you start distilling some kind of truth out of that. What is generally true about what people said about Shanann? How many people mentioned that she had OCD? How many people said she was controlling? How many people said Watts was a nice guy? How many people said that he complained about the children's health? How many people knew about the finances? Were the finances in bad shape? What did Kessinger know about it? Is she telling the truth about it? Is she likely telling the truth about it? Did her knowledge of it have an impact? So all of these things one needs to study and then think about. You need to have this information and then make a call on it, and that takes intelligence, it takes insight, it takes a lot of knowledge, it takes sort of keeping up to date with this, and it also takes the kind of ability to apply criminal psychology to a criminal, where you understand him and you understand how he's lying and why he's lying, but at the same time you understand what that is deflecting you away from. What is he trying to get you away from that is worse, or that is the actual thing, right? What is the actual story here? And so there's another person on YouTube who's very qualified, who's a defense attorney, and he's one of the better commentators of this case, but even he hasn't challenged, as far as I know, Watts's version. In other words, well, he's a defense lawyer, but he hasn't challenged Watts's version that, did he really kill his children at the well site, which drills down to the aspect of, was it a premeditated crime or not? And so if you're going to accept that version that he killed his children at the well site, then it's not a premeditated version, then it's right. But I guess if you have a certain opinion about how smart or dumb Watts is, then that belief is going to sort of tick the box that you need to tick whenever you need to tick it, and so you can sort of make up the story as it goes along. But that's then going to change as information comes out. And so I think the value of the Two-Face series is that, I nailed my colors to a post and basically said, this is what his version is, but this is what the evidence shows, and I think this is likely what happened. And one of the sort of signature aspects of this case, which hasn't been discussed much, but which would have come up in a court case, is the fact that there are no sounds in the middle of the night of trauma. In other words, when 3 murders take place, nobody hears them, right? It's not just one murder, it's 3. So when 3 murders take place, or if you like, 2 attempted murders and 1 actual murder, and these are murders through strangulation. In other words, it's a murder that takes anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes per murder. So by implication, that implies for 15 minutes, Watts is able to prevent anyone from hearing these noises, including the people in the house. So when you're murdering A, then murder victim B and C, who haven't been murdered yet, don't hear that. And the same applies to B and so on. And so you don't have any noise in the middle of the night. And why is that? You don't even have Dieter, who's in the house, responding to the let's call it low volume noise, but cries of what's the word? Not trauma, but a dog can sense when someone is going through distress. Animals are very in tune to distress. So, why wouldn't Dieter have barked if any one of the children were crying or upset? Why would Dieter not have barked if Shanann was fighting for her life? Kicking on the carpet or struggling. Why was there no barking in the middle of the night from the Watts home? And we know that the neighbor had heard and was capable of overhearing what was going on next door. And that's another thing that the narratives do show, is the way that the neighborhood is designed and configured. The houses are right next to each other. The Watts home was literally right beside houses on 2 sides, and then also not that far from houses on the other side. So the fact that nothing was heard tells you quite a lot about the way that the crime was actually executed. And let's face it, in a lot of these other high profile cases, you hear rumors or stories of screams in the middle of the night, We have that with John Benet Ramsey. We have that with Amanda Knox and the murder of Meredith Kercher. You often do hear these screams in the middle of the night, and people aren't always sure about them, but that is heard. In the Watts case, there's no screams. It's a silent death. And as a matter of fact, you have the same thing with Scott Peterson. And what does a silent death tell you? It tells you that there was premeditation. So just by telling you this, I'm trying to convince you that as much analysis as is being discussed on YouTube, there are other resources out there, and please go and read. Do some reading. Go and read the blog post on Crime Rocket and go and read the books. And you'll see that the Two-Face series is an evolving narrative. You know, as each book goes on, the knowledge base increases and our insight into the case increases. But you need the one in order to develop the next one. You need the platform of the one, building up kind of a theory and a hypothesis in order to expand on it in the next one. And people who appreciate true crime rocket science and who've read other narratives from John Benet to Madeleine McCann and so on, I think you will have appreciated how you build a hypothesis that is separate from what the suspects claim. And that's what's so vital is, you have an unsolved mystery or unsolved murder like certain of these cases. Well, the only way to solve it is to provide a solution, and that is what true crime rocket science is all about. So yeah, in conclusion, Silver Fox is still under development. It's still kind of a work in progress. The idea there is sort of linking up what we know in the first, second, and third confession to what we don't know, and again deciding whether and how to fine-tune the hypothesis that was built in the very first narrative. But what we're trying to do with the Silver Fox series is understand Chris Watts in a way that he hasn't really been understood before. And the third confession he gives is for the first time in his own words, in a sense, and on his own terms, and that provides us with a very unique window into his psychology, which I think does take the narrative forward. Thank you for listening.
So she was a spender. The car, hers or his?
I think it's hers.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that that's hers.
Do you know what other car they might have?
Well, I mean, his APC pickup truck.
And that's
it, I think.
That's owned by Anadarko, though, right?
Yeah. But so I don't think they own any other vehicles, as far as I know. I think it's just that thing.
And Anadarko doesn't allow him to drive that on his own personal time,
No,
right?
no.
So he's just got one vehicle.
Yep.
And it's a very expensive Lexus. And then they live in a pretty expensive house.
It's a huge house.
Yeah.
I was very taken back when I saw it. I was just like, whoa. How
and
do
then
you
the
guys...
fixtures inside caused you to pause.
Everything was just like...
And then you mentioned today you read something about bankruptcy.
Yep.
What did you read?
That those guys filed bankruptcy for a lot of money in...
Who are those guys?
To that couple.
Okay.
In 2015. Oh, Shanann and Chris
Thanks.
filed bankruptcy in 2015.
Okay. And you said for a lot of money. Do you recall the amount?
No, because it was different in each of the newspapers, and I don't know which one to believe. Okay. So, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, yeah, I didn't know that.
Let's go just back to him and the financial. He tells you he has a concern enough to at least express something to you that he's frustrated with the way she spends, or he's upset with working so hard and never having any money, and she's kind of the responsibility she's the responsible party for spending most of the money.
I pretty much got that vibe. I mean, he just told me, he's like, we're house broke all the time. I was just like, that's unfortunate. And I asked him, I was like, do you have 401k? And he was like, yeah. And I mean, the reason I ask him this is because if I get into a relationship with somebody, I want to know, like, what kind of baggage that they have. I think that's important if I walk into a situation where I'm like, hey, I have good credit and I have all of these things that I've been building and you don't have your stuff together, like, what are we going to do with this? And it's important for your long-term
You're smart.
thing. So I'm preparing. And so I just asked him, I was like, well, do you have 401k? And he's like, yeah, I do have that. And then I asked him, I was like, I didn't ask him, like, how much debt they had or anything, but I just said, is your lifestyle sustainable? And he was like, no. And I was like, how long do you think that's going to take? He's like, I don't know, but it's not sustainable.
Where did his girls go to school?
I don't know. He never actually told me. Like, when I asked him once, it was like when I was trying to find him an apartment, I was like, are you comfortable telling me where your girls go to school? That's in the text too. I was like, so I can figure out what distance from the apartment it is. I was trying to just make his life convenient with, like, him, his ex, his kids, and all the stuff that he needs to do and work. And he was like, don't worry about it. Their school's pretty centrally located, so anywhere in the area that we were discussing will be fine. And he just left it at that. So he didn't even tell me, which was fine. I respect that.
Daycare is obviously very expensive for a 3 and 5 year old,
Oh, yeah.
right? So
I
did
understand.
he ever bring did he ever discuss that?
Never.
Okay.
Never.
How was it that you were spending so much money? What was it makes sense?
Just, you know, kids and just other bills that we had, and just, I mean, I knew the car was getting paid for by the bell. You know, I never really asked to see, like, I mean, I didn't even have access to the bank account through my phone.
Oh,
So, like, I never really asked to see what it looked like how far, but I just know she'd call me and tell me, hey, can you pay the mortgage today? I'm like, yeah, cool. And that's, you know, from my little four-wheeler incident where I sold it without actually paying it off yet, and she thought, like, no, you're never touching the accounts ever. So I'm like, okay, that's cool with me. But I never saw the account or what was in there. I just, like, hey, there's like when I worked at Longmont Ford, I got my check, I just brought it there.
Yeah.
So,
There's a hair care company, I think it's called Monat. Does that ring a bell? You know anything about that?
Mhm.
Like maybe hair dye. I don't know. It's like a. Do you know she did like an auto order through that company? Has stuff delivered for her, any kind of hair care product or hair care dye?
not something. I mean, she had like little. I remember something like a little gift pack she had delivered once every month or once every 2 months. Had like a different array of different products in it.
Don't remember where it's from. Okay.
No. Like we said, Monet.
Monat, M-O-N-A-T.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Ring a bell.
Okay. There was an order that was made, like $251. That's why I asked if it was like an auto order type
It
thing.
might have been an auto order.
Yeah,
It
right.
might have been something that I know that Nicole Atkinson, she's sending all that stuff. Maybe Shanann got her. Maybe Shanann got her something, or maybe it was something she recommended.
Okay. Okay. How about the HOA thing? What happened there?
She was mailing to the wrong address. They changed her address, and she'd mailed to the wrong address for a year. And then we got a letter in the mail where we getting like sued over it. We didn't pay our HOAs for a year, so we had to pay double for either a whole year or a couple months. That sucked.
What happened to all the money that she sent to the wrong address?
Don't know. I don't know. They said they wouldn't credit it or anything. I'm not even sure what the address was.
But understand that at this point, I still can't answer questions about the facts surrounding the investigation.
Really all everyone wanted throughout was justice for Shanann and Bella and Celeste. We're certainly pleased this seems to be the outcome.
think all of those who were involved never truly believed that he would give us an accurate statement. What I can tell you most affirmatively today by what happened in the courtroom is the spotlight that he tried to shine on Shanann falsely, incorrectly, and frankly a flat-out lie is the spotlight that he tried to shine on Shanann falsely, incorrectly, and frankly a flat-out lie is incorrect.
I didn't know what else to do.
And he's so disgusting. I'm so ashamed of him.
Why? Why? How? I don't even understand how you could bring yourself to do that to somebody who's like
It was a shocking deal news of the week. Occidental increasing its bid for Anadarko to $76 a share.